Hello, and welcome to another edition of the One Drink Book Club. Today, we're going to be discussing the fantasy novel Legends Lattes by Travis Baldree. In the book, the main character is an orc named Viv who wants to take a break from her barbarian mercenary lifestyle and start a coffee shop in a new town that has never heard of coffee. As she deals with the challenges of starting a small business and marketing a product that no one knows about, she finds new friends and employees that kind of become her found family. My guest tonight is Josh Niesse, who is a friend who brings a unique perspective to book discussions because he and his wife have owned two independent bookstores and now run an online store dealing in rare books. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a pleasure.
This is super fun. We discussed this at a dinner a couple of weeks ago, and you suggested this book, which I really enjoyed. But what made you suggest this book?
So we just sold our two independent bookstores and are preparing for a move. And my kind of book selling identity, like in the book selling world, people will often like follow independent booksellers' recommendations. It has been historically mostly about serious nonfiction and or literary fiction and things like that. And during this life transition, I feel like almost the way some people are like chop all their hair off or do a big change. Like I'm like, oh, I need to explore something different. So I've been enjoying uh, books that are just pure escapism and fun and enjoyable and things that trying to books that can calm my nervous system rather than have me raging at the world. So it's a bit of a turn of direction. So it's part of the life phase, I guess, is part of why I chose that book. I actually read it almost a year ago, or listened to it actually, and loved it.
And I think you're right. It has this kind of calming effect. It's both enjoyable but not stressful. Um, I've always thought I will read nonfiction, which I enjoy, but I usually need kind of a palate cleanser after it. I can't read 2, 3 nonfictions in a row, and this is the perfect kind of book. It's not too long, it's fun, it's cute,
Yeah.
the characters are fun. It's interesting you mentioned that you listened to it. I did as well, and in the first, whatever, the intro of the audiobook,
Yeah.
it says, "It will be read by the author," and I
Yeah.
kinda groaned because normally it's so cringy, I find, when I think, these authors generally are not good voice actors, and
Yeah, it can be hit or miss when an author's reading their own, for sure.
yeah, but he was really good, and then when I did my research before tonight, I found that he had voiced other books, before he had been an author, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. I didn't even know that until you had pointed that out, actually. I do remember loving the narration, though. Like, he nailed it. I know it's like, obviously, it's,
Yeah.
he having a good time with it.
Yeah, and, like I said, there have been a couple of books that I could not finish, on the audiobook because the author felt the need to do his own.
It's incredible how much of an impact the quality of the narration can make on
Yeah,
an audiobook, for
I
sure.
think it can make or break it sometimes. Um, well, first question, or I guess this would be the second question, is what cocktail did you make for, Legends and Lattes?
I went all out. I made a Thimble's Old Fashioned. Thimble is the baker Ratkin in the that begins working for Viv in her coffee shop. And one of Thimble's signature creations is it's almost like a croissant or a baked item that it has cardamom and orange. So I made cardamom simple syrup.
Ooh,
I did this yesterday,
man,
and
you get
and used that in my old fashioned here with a squeeze of orange, and it's delicious actually. So
you get
yeah.
extra points for making your own simple syrup, uh, a unique simple syrup, for your
I
drink.
mean, all the obvious choices I was coming up with were coffee related, but we're doing this, listeners, at 8 p.m. at night. So I wasn't was afraid if I actually made a coffee drink here that I'd be regretting it at 2 in the morning.
Well, you've now shamed me because I did do a coffee-related drink. Obviously, the
Amazing.
big the obvious one would be an espresso martini, um, so I didn't wanna go super obvious, but I made a cold brew Negroni. which is
Mm.
basically a regular Negroni, which is an ounce of Campari, an ounce of gin, an ounce of sweet vermouth, and then added to it a half ounce of cold brew. And it's nice.
Nice.
It actually Negronis, people who like Negronis love Negronis. And for
Yeah.
me, they tend to be a little too boozy,
Uh-huh.
but the cold brew kinda cuts that a little bit. So I like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I could see that being good. Well,
Mm,
cheers.
cheers to
I
you.
meant to write down I think mine was 2 ounces of bullet bourbon, um, probably an ounce of the, I didn't measure actually, but, an ounce-ish of the simple syrup, and then a squeeze of orange in it and stir with the ice. So
Perfect.
pretty simple.
Yeah. Um,
Oh, and bitters, orange bitter. I had orange Angostura
ooh,
bitters. That's what
perfect.
makes it the old fashioned. That's right. Yeah.
I have gotten I've started using for my old fashions this orange spray. It's like orange extract, and you can just hit the top with a little spray, and it is a nice way of doing it because I find the orange peel is a little hit or miss in terms of how much flavor or essence it offers.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah, I actually just squeezed a bit of it orange over this actually, so it has a little bits of OJ in it, which is not proper, but it was easy.
Hey, it sounds delicious. Uh,
It's really good.
that's a good one. Um
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. So, since reading this, I went and then I read some other reviews, and I discovered that this is a whole category that I had nothing to I had no idea existed called
Yes.
cozy fantasy, which I thought
Yes.
was an apt description. In fact, there was a review that kind of, stuck with me that referred to it as the Hallmark, movie version of fantasy where
Yes, it's so true.
it's a little
Yes.
predictable, you kinda
Yeah.
see where the story is going, but it's still heartwarming and enjoyable nonetheless. Have you read other cozy fantasy books?
Yes, and a quick note about it is that for a really long time, there has been an established genre called cozy mysteries. And that goes way back, like, they've been cranking these out. It's been the little mass markets you see at the grocery store aisle, like, for decades, and they've got, a cat in a bookstore, and it's like, "Oh, there's a knife too," and there was it's like it's like, been a thing for a long time, but it's kind of been new to, other genres having this kind of idea of that, which is interesting. But it really had a moment, Baldree's books have been on the New York Times bestseller list, like, obviously, it's tapped
Yeah.
into some cultural kind of reason that it is, speaking to people right now. Um, so yeah, there's others I've read. I've provided a list that I think Jamey said he can share in the comments of other cozy fantasy books I've liked that both my wife and I like. My probably other personal favorite. It's almost a bit more toward the sci-fi side of it, is Becky
Mm.
Chambers. She writes incredible ones. They're almost more like utopian sci-fi, but they're
Oh,
similarly where there's like I'd say the signature thing of these cozy fantasy or cozy sci-fi or cozy mystery and thing is that it tends to be a bit lower stakes, so it's not when we think of fantasy, we think of Lord of the
yeah.
Rings. You've got to go to Mordor, you've got to defeat evil and save the entire cosmos. And that's a lot of pressure. We have jobs and shit, and it's hard. Like life is stressful enough already. Don't put all the weight of having to go like defeat Sauron on, it just be like, how about I run my local business and like don't run afoul of the local racket like Viv and the orc she's retired from adventuring and doesn't want all that stress, just wants to go run her little small business and the things she runs into. It's really, I don't know, it's fun. I love it.
Well, you say that the cozy mystery thing, it all of a sudden, it clicked in my head. I'm like, "I love cozy mysteries." Like, I didn't know that there was a
Yeah.
name of them, but, like, the whole Thursday Murder Club is cozy
Yes,
mystery.
exactly.
Um,
Yes, exactly.
uh
Yeah, I mean, and it's a trope there. And on the mystery side, you recognize he's like playing in a long history. Richard Osman is throwing trope after trope that have been established in that genre, and fantasy's doing some catching up there, I think, and kind of they're playing turning the tropes upside down. I made a note about that actually, where it's like, um, It's a lot of the fantasy tropes are there, but they strip it of the expected kind of like violence or the epic good and evil, and they replace it with just like domestic warmth or everyday
Sure.
problems.
Well, I
Um,
think the relationships seem to be a big part of it too, where people,
yes.
develop relationships, new relationships that are close and warm and supportive,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, found family, you mentioned. It's absolutely a signature hallmark.
yeah, and I think, what's very interesting to me is that in our own lives, I find that pretty rare, especially after you become an adult. And there's only a few times in your life where you're kind of like open to new friendships. Like it's an interesting thing. But clearly the popularity of these books show that there's a yearning for that.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it makes sense in so many ways. We're more isolated than ever, social media, political tribalism, all our own
Yeah,
we just aren't, even Megan and I even, are door dashing half the time rather than going out. You're just like, so of course we long for this kind of human connection. It makes a lot of sense.
yeah. Um, so Viv,
And forced proximity, actually, that's another one of the old tropes in romance, especially, is this idea. So that way you talk about why, in college, you make lots of new friends because you've kind of got a forced proximity to things too. So I think that's another thing that sets up these situations where people are going to be encountering new people. And
totally. Well, I also think, some people get it at new jobs. You kind of have an opportunity to get new friends. If you have kids, like, you're a new parent, that kind of puts you in a tumultuous situation where you're looking for other people going through the same thing. Um,
yeah,
but it's not something that happens every day. Uh, and it's something I really enjoy about these stories, especially I think another hallmark of it, at least when I look back at those mysteries that I enjoy, is that it's people from different walks of life who get to meet each other.
mhm.
It's never a homogeneous group. Um,
Right.
you've got an oddball who does this, and and here it's even more pronounced because you've got an orc with a succubus,
Yeah,
with a
a ratkin.
ratkin,
Yeah, a
and a
gnome.
gnome,
Mhm.
a goblin, hobgoblin. But they're all really, like, cute and, warm, and helpful.
Exactly.
So,
And not like massive heroes. They're just like kind of it's like, the gnome guy's just like the carpenter that's skilled and is like Viv hires him and it's like, oh, well, then they become buds.
yeah. Um, and Thimble, he likes to come in. He's one of the early customers for coffee, as she's trying to
Uh-huh.
convince people that coffee is something they should like and want every
Yeah.
day, and they notice that he's covered in flour every day, and then they decide, well, if we have a coffee shop, people might need a little snack, and he, comes
Yes.
in with his first cinnamon roll, and they all, like, die for it, and so all of a
Yeah.
sudden it becomes an element of the menu.
Yeah. And he's a great character, like super antisocial and awkward and quiet and keeps to himself and has to, you got to warm up to him for him to
Yeah,
open up and be friends with them. Sweet.
yeah. Um, Viv, who's our main character, who is, you know, trying not to revert to her, violent and, physically forceful ways, gets confronted a couple of times while she's, starting this small business. There's kind of a local protection racket who comes by, and, she keeps telling herself, like, well, don't, she's hung her sword on the wall as a both a, symbolic thing where I'm hanging up my old life,
Yes.
but it's also kind of a decoration. And there's a temptation to be like, "Ooh, I kinda want her to take it down and just, like, wreak
Oh,
havoc
totally.
on these
Yeah.
people."
And there's a sense that she totally could, that it's like these like local jokers that are like, yeah, you gotta pay the local protect, like she could like wipe the floor with them, but she's trying to be like, well, I'm not trying to just lean on my old ways and go to beat people up. Like, I mean, I put that behind me. This is a new Viv. But yeah, you definitely kind of want to see her just like, oh, just kick their butts.
Yeah. Yeah, I kinda, it would be, yeah, like a Mel
You
Gibson
do get
movie.
a little of that. So in the other, like, so there's two others that that are part of this in this world. Bookshops and Bone Dust is the second one, and it's actually a prequel. So
Mm.
you do get more of Viv in her adventuring
Oh,
days.
that's fun.
She's yeah, it is, and that I've read that one and I loved it. And then there's a third one that's come out more recently called Brigands and Bread Knives, and I have not read that one
Hmm.
yet. Megan did, and she says it's her favorite of the three. So
Oh,
it's on deck for me.
that's high praise. Um,
Yes.
well, we talked about our Cal, our carpenter, and Thimble, the baker. Who are some of the other characters you liked who end up being part of Viv's universe and her found
Um,
family?
I know. Let's see. So there's Cal is the the gnome carpenter. I really liked him. Um, um, Amity. Oh, Megan and I are cat people. We have three cats. One of them will probably make an appearance here if we chat long enough. Um, Amity's a dire cat, which is a kind of a character in many fantasy novels, which is a kind of an oversized, really smart cat that comes and goes and has its own like real
Yeah.
cats, does its own thing, doesn't really, follow directions, but it kind of adopts the
Yeah.
cafe and is like a kind of like volunteer guard dog. So Amity is a crowd favorite. Um, and there's Pendry, who's the local bard that
Yep.
comes in and starts, playing music and performing for the guests at the cafe.
And attracts
I
the
think that
younger
kind of
ladies.
Yes,
Henry does not
yes.
realize.
And then Tandri is the fellow employee, a succubus that
Yeah.
works, kind of helps Viv get it off the ground, but also kind of becomes the romantic interest as well.
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting. They had the romantic interest, um, but it was a very low key romantic interest. I mean, they have
I
a few
I think that's in
moments.
keeping with the genre a lot
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
and you're like, "Oh, well, it's kinda nice they're getting together," but it wasn't, like, hot and heavy, and it wasn't
Yeah.
disruptive
Yeah.
to the rest of the group. It was just kinda like, "Hey, we like being around each other, and that's cool.
Yes.
Maybe
Yeah.
we'll,
Yes.
bunk
Also,
up."
like I one of the things that Megan mentioned that all this we were talking about this as we went on a walk earlier, like what are our things about the genre that we like, and she was like, "Well, I like it that it's like in many ways more realistic." It's like that's probably how a lot more romantic relationships begin. Actually, it might be like I like hanging out with you, and in real life than I don't know the fireworks that are in the movies.
Yeah, yes. Who was I was talking to somebody recently about the Rebecca Yarros, fantasy book, and
Uh huh.
my big complaint about them, like, okay, I can suspend disbelief on several things that we're talking about here.
Yeah, there's already
Yeah,
dragons.
we already have dragons, there's all this other stuff, but the hot and heavy sex scenes, which normally, I'm not opposed to, throw in as many as you want, but they became so, like, cliché and repetitive, and then, the lightning and thunder would happen, and I would be like, "Okay,
Yes.
alright, we've
Mm.
been here, done that," like,
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, that is a funny review of those books, actually, is that the most unbelievable thing isn't the dragons, it's the sex scenes.
You can't, maintain that level of, excitement and lust for as long as they have, even when you're, whatever, 22 or whatever it is.
Mm.
Um, so they also had some villains. We've mentioned the Toughs, but then there's also somebody from Viv's past who was kinda part of her gang, uh, out in the
Yes.
mercenary days, who was a little more untrustworthy than her other friends, who
Right.
also makes a play for the coffee shop and
Well,
causes
there's
trouble.
in the opening scene, it's not too big of a spoiler, there's, like, this thing called the Scalvert Stone that's a kind of an important plot point that I'd forgotten about, actually, until I was revisiting this, and it's like, when Viv's last adventuring group kind of goes on their last adventure and they win a big treasure, Viv knows about the lore of this kind of like magical stone and is like, I just want that. I just want that to be my share. And it's kind of like almost like a good luck charm. She buries it in the coffee shop when she builds it at the beginning, and it ends up playing a like kind of important point throughout the plot. I won't give away any spoilers with, but she believes it is a very like important good luck charm that's going to be the secret to the coffee shop's success. So one of her former adventuring partners, who is a little unethical, is like figures out that she has it and wants it for himself. So that's kind of one of the plot lines.
Yes. Well, did you have a favorite villain of the villains that they mentioned? Like I said,
What's
there weren't
what's
many, but
funny is
there's a couple.
um what's one the one that comes to mind, and I can't remember their name, but what was funny to me is, as Megan and I were talking about it, is again this realistic part when there was a character who was just loitering in the coffee shop. It's not even actually like a villain; it's just like an
Yeah,
annoyance, kind
yeah.
of. We were like, that is very realistic to small business ownership,
A retail
and
owner
that
knows
just
this?
like we like absolutely laughed our butts over little points in the story like that were like, that's actually like. Uh, in some ways, the like head of the local protection racket ends up being like a pretty cool character that Viv,
Buddies up to. Almost
uh,
they become
talks
friends.
things through
Yeah,
with, basically,
yeah.
yeah, and ends up being like, oh, they're like practically a scholar and a gentleman. It's like they're you kind of like them as well. So it's really the character that I find most annoying is this loitering pest. Um,
When you say that and put it in context of, a bookstore, I'm reminded of the Notting Hill, uh, scenes where, they have that guy who comes into his travel bookstore and is constantly asking about, like, regular novels, and
yes,
they're like, "Get
yes,
out. We don't do stop it."
yes, yes, yes. They're playing with real tropes there. There's those stereotypes for a reason.
Um, well, speaking of the retail experience, I have some questions to ask you, that kind of
Yeah.
are about the independent bookstore world. Um,
Yeah.
so, I always like the idea of supporting local independent bookstores, um, but, eh, w what do you tell people? Why do you think it's important to keep this, um, out there and to keep the value of the independence?
I mean, there's a lot of angles. I mean, in many ways, like the local retail bookstores are also doing so much. They're, creating third spaces. They're places where people are going to events. It's where, literally we just talked about there's this longing for human connection and not, we had so many people that were regulars at our bookstores that knew they could get the book for $5 cheaper on Amazon, but wanted to come into a local place because there was human connection to be had there,
Sure.
or that they could get recommendations from live humans, see what people in their community are reading and loving, because we'd have handwritten, little like shelf talkers, they call them, like the
Oh,
bookseller
yeah.
recommendations throughout the store. So there's that third space piece. But even just like zooming out from a publishing world angle, it's that it has to do with diversity in the kinds of books that are being published, like the different types of viewpoints. Like if you're just going off of what sells at Target or Amazon or Walmart or things like that, and then the publishers are just using those kind of data streams to be like, well, we should only publish more things like this.
Sure.
If you have 5,000 small places like independent bookstores that are curating different selections based on the idiosyncrasies and quirks of their booksellers' favorite books and what their community likes, then you end up with more diverse stories being told, because that's inevitably going to just more um a greater variety of books will sell that way, and then the publishing industry will then get that data and say, oh, it makes sense for us to publish 500 books a year, and only print 10 or 20,000 of them, rather than like 100 books a year and print 50 or 100,000 of them, and then you just have the James Pattersons of the world and things like that. So there's like an ecosystem argument to be made as far as like investing in them both creates an important space in your community and supports a more longer term idea that we want to have different types of books and more diverse voices getting kind of rising to the surface and selling.
Sure.
Um, there's an angle, an argument I've used before. There's this term called um, in ecology. There's a term where called an indicator species, where like a biologist would go and take a water sample from local rivers, and if they find certain species in it, that will tell them that that ecosystem is healthy and there's not a lot of toxins and poisons in it, and that there's lots of ecological diversity there, and that's like almost in a like urban planning context or a town planning, like the existence of little bookstores like that is almost, I think of it like an indicator species. It's a sign that there's like a healthy and vibrant local kind of reading community that is enough to support that bookstore. Then it probably means that there's, like for us, when we opened, we were the only store on our block in downtown Carrollton, Georgia, where our first store opened. And, I like to think that we contributed to the revitalization of that area. People were like, oh, if a bookstore can make it here, let's open this record store 3 doors down, which happened.
Oh, wow.
And a couple years after we opened. And it's more that, when you support it, you're voting with your dollars. It's you want to have these kind of vibrant things in your neighborhood, then you've got to support them. Fortunately, there are more ways than ever to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think that
Um,
the indicator species analogy is really good. I think that's a great
Yes, yeah.
way to look at it, and I think it makes sense. My favorite independent bookstore is one in Rehoboth Beach. Uh, we spend a lot of time in Rehoboth, and it's called Browse About Books, and I almost
Great name.
I almost only buy looking at the staff picks section. And what I do is I scan all the books. I look for books that I've already read that I like, and I see who liked them, and then I go and look at
Yeah.
what else they have suggested.
Yeah, that's smart. I think that's a lot of people do that. I've had lots of people be like, "Oh, I love that book and that book. What else does this bookseller recommend?" Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. Um, we've, at work, I've done some, book promotion stuff, and it's always been really interesting to me to see how a book becomes a bestseller, and I think the numbers are remarkably small. I mean, there's a whole gaming of the system, New York Times looks at sales between Tuesday and Tuesday, and whatever sells in that week, and so if you're gonna do book promotion, all book launches are on Tuesday because they wanna, get that in there and pre
It is a long-standing quirk of publishing, Tuesday book releases.
yeah, and but if you have, 10,000 books selling, in a nonfiction book, you can end up on the top 10, which to me seems like a very small number. But then it kind of is
Yeah.
self-perpetuating because people see it's on the bestseller list and then more people buy it and
Absolutely. They've done a lot, being a New York Times reporting store, which is, not all it's like they're not collecting all of the data, they're just taking a sample in basically. One of our 2 stores was a New York Times reporting store. Um, and Uh, yeah, the number, it depends on the time of year, but,
yeah,
there's certain, in the spring and the fall is when all the big books come out. So if you, and actually even Travis Baldree, this, an interesting backstory of him is that he originally self-published it. And
really?
then it was yes, it was such a hit that then Tor, owned by Macmillan, one of the big 5 publishers, ended up picking it up and buying it, and then, putting their marketing machine behind it. But it's becoming a common story, especially I would say in genre fiction, where people will self-publish their books and they'll sell 100,000 copies of the ebook, or self-published
Yeah.
print-on-demand books, and then it'll get the attention of the big publishers, and they will buy it and like bring it into the fold. And that's what's happened with Travis Baldree's books. So he wrote it himself and published it himself, and it blew up. And but then a lot of times when it gets to a point where if you've self-published a book and you're selling tens of thousands of copies, it's like you can't even, it's beyond one person's
Sure.
ability to even manage all of that. Like, so it makes sense to
Yeah.
um, take a publishing deal then, because you get their entire marketing staff and all of that to, support you, their distribution networks and things like that.
Well,
Um,
that what a feather in his cap, like, that's super
I
cool,
know. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. It's a great story.
to have been able to
Um,
do that, well, it's a democratization of that publishing world, the ability to self-publish and have a market. I mean, it's the SoundCloud, it's YouTube, all of these things where you don't necessarily need the blessing of the corporate gods, in order to be
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah, that democratization is good. It's a double-edged blade in some ways because it's also like for booksellers in particular, like historically, we would have accounts with a dozen major publishers and then, some small publishers, and we would get their catalogs and we'd have sales reps and they would pitch us their books coming out 6 months from now. And so you've got these kind of like, um, gatekeepers that are saying like,
Sure.
these are quality things. And so, yeah, it's democratized, but now as a bookseller, we would get sometimes 20 to 50 a month
Wow.
they're
Sure. Yeah.
unsolicited, self-published authors saying, "Hey, will you carry my book? Will you carry my book? Will you carry my book?" And that creates its own just tornado of challenges on both sides, of just being like, how do you? It's so much to you. When we started, I would try to like give a personal response to every single person that came in. Eventually, we just couldn't, and we had a boilerplate response. And
Sure.
then eventually, we got so many. I was like, I can't even respond to all these,
Right.
let alone like seriously consider each of them. So from a book selling standpoint, it's challenging, but from a writing standpoint, it's great to be able to, crank that out on your own and not have to have the gatekeepers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I started doing this podcast, clearly kind of more of a hobby podcast. I'm not trying to turn it into more than just something I enjoy doing. But I mean, very early on, I started getting um, outreach from book publicists and things. And I
Yeah.
thought to myself, wow, like you are really desperate to get, here, if you're talking to me.
That's funny.
Um, but I've also, and people have sent me books, and, my whole shtick is that I wanna talk about books I enjoyed reading, and so there have been a couple where I've had to, it sounded interesting, I started reading and said, "Yeah, not for me, I'm sorry, I'm not, I'm not gonna finish this." So, but
Yeah.
my goal is not to have people I'm not trying to get people on and then tell them that I thought their book stunk.
No, no, oh, no, yeah, that would be awful, yeah. But at least I mean, even just giving them a chance to giving a chance to read it and then giving them honest feedback,
Sure.
honestly, when I think, for us, when we've had to do that, the authors have tended to be, thankful. It's like, "Hey, most of the time I don't get a response, so you giving it attention and responding to me at all, or, usually, there's some gratitude anyway there that's,
Well, it's funny,
what it's worth."
every time I've had an author on, um, I think to the person, they've all said after we were finished recording, "Wow, it's obvious you read the book." Like, I've done a number of these interviews, and clearly, you're the first person
That
who's
is
actually read it.
wild.
Um,
Yeah, I can't imagine having to interview someone and not having read the book.
well
That's like sounds like a nightmare, actually.
well, to be fair, there's a couple of the publicists some of the publicists are better than others at giving you uh, like talking points and cheat sheets and questions so that you could
Ah,
pull it off. Uh,
yeah, yeah, that
but,
makes sense. Yeah.
I think it's more fun.
They do that too for books, or like if you're doing an event with an author, they'll send you all kinds of support materials and
Sure,
things. Yeah.
sure, that makes sense. You turned me on to, I listen to 95% of the books I read, and you told me about Libre, which is, an independent bookstore version, like, of Audible.
Yep.
Tell
No, it's a
Oh, Libro.
Libro.fm.
Okay.
Yep.
Talk about that
Um,
a little bit. How's that work?
yes. Um, there are a couple of things like this, but Libro.fm and bookshop.org are two ways that you can get the convenience of shopping through something like Amazon's Audible, or to get either physical books online through bookshop.org as the alternative, or audiobooks through Libro.fm. And Libro.fm is pretty much identical to Audible. Like the price structure is very similar.
Mm.
It's,
Yeah.
$14.99 a month for one credit. They run specials. There's all kinds of things. You can get multiple credits. You can sign up for yearly memberships. There's different structures, but the costs are very comparable. However, the key difference is when you sign up for Libro.fm, you pick a local independent bookstore that you want your purchases to support, and then that local bookstore gets some of that from Libro. So we get, a quarterly check from Libro FM basically for all of the audiobook listeners who have subscribed to Libro FM and chosen Underground Books as their store they want to support. So we have a few hundred people doing that, and it adds up, and it's been had a big impact on the independent bookstore world, these tools where it's typically what's called a affiliate marketing, or
Sure.
really, like, we're not actually emailing you the audiobook. You're just saying, hey, you can go to libro.fm/underground books, and there'll be all sorts of curated playlists, all of our staff picks, things like that. So you can go, if you're someone that loves Megan's fantasy recommendations, or historically my nonfiction lists, then you could go there and say, oh, I've loved everything Josh has recommended. Let me go see what Josh's staff picks say. And you can go find those and look at the, lists, years worth of little book recommendations and notes, and say, hey, I'm going to go read more of that. And then when you pick it and download it, then, a few dollars of that goes to that local bookstore. It's incredible. And then bookshop.org is the thing for print physical books. And they've actually added ebooks now as well. So Libro.fm has a free app that's just, you listen on Libro FM rather than Audible. Bookshop.org, you can order print books, or you can read through the bookshop.org e-reader app on your device. They're phenomenal. So it's been transformative. I mean, it changed our lives literally when these tools came on board, and we had, if you've got a local bookstore that has, a few hundred passionate supporters, but they come in once a week or once a month and they buy a physical book, but they're doing ebooks, or they need the convenience of just being able to order a book and have it show up at the doorstep in a few days. But they still want to support their local bookstore while getting that convenience. These tools are phenomenal.
Well, I
Yep, check it out. Bookshop.org and Libro.fm. Check them out.
And I listened to this book on Libro.fm, and the experience was identical to Audible. Same
Great.
thing. And I will put these links in the descriptions of both
Thank
the
you.
audio podcast and the video podcast. But that sounds like a great solution to kind of supporting those local bookstores. And if you don't have one near you, you can use Josh's Underground Book.
Yes, yeah. If you have a local one, pick them. Almost all the independent bookstores out there right now have their own. They're on Libro. They're on bookshop.org. So when you shop on those places, you can pick those as the places to support. Or if you don't have one, then yeah, check out Underground Books, and we would love to have your support. And we've got lots of lists up there. One of the things you can use, we made a custom list of all of the books that have been featured on Jamey's One Drink, One Book podcast. So he's had 25 or so episodes. So if you go to Libro or Bookshop or look at the links below this podcast, then you'll see a list of all the books Jamey has featured. So if you're a fan of what he's been doing, then yeah.
Perfect.
So that's one of the ways we use these too, is create partnerships that way.
Sure. That's great. That's great. Well, what are you reading right now? What's on your book stand?
Good question. Right now it is not in the cozy fantasy realm. I am back in my heavy nonfiction list here. I'm reading One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against Us. It won the National Book Award. It's about Gaza. It's extremely potent. It's really powerful writing. It reminds me of James Baldwin, actually. I feel like he's kind of occupying a spot as that 21st century James Baldwin. It's an anti-war book. It's nonfiction, but it's also an essay about him he's lived in Canada, but is from the Middle East, and it's, had his entire, he came when he was a child, but has had an entire career here. So a lot of it's, alternating stories between how he has experienced, being a Middle Eastern person here, which is oftentimes when there's 9/11, there's waves of terrorism, how he gets treated, and then also trying to, as a journalist, cover these complicated stories. It's really extraordinary writing. That's what I'm reading on the fiction side. On the nonfiction side. One thing I wanted to plug that is on the cozy side. This isn't technically cozy fantasy, but it is all of the rage right now. Have you heard about this?
No.
Dungeon Crawler Carl. Megan is currently knee deep in this series. It is kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, and it's not and while it's not cozy exactly, like it's like a little bit gruesome and stuff, but it's super fun. It still is kind of feel good. There's a found family element, as I understand, and people are really like, it is the rage right now. And these are also like his next one's about to come out in the series, and it's going to be a New York Times bestseller. Like it's a big deal. Um, and then if there was one, if I hadn't recommended fiction that was on the cozy fantasy side when we were talking, Jamey, initially, this would have been the one I would have picked.
Ooh.
Babel by R.F. Kuang.
Ooh,
It's
okay.
kind of shiny there. You can't see it, but
Yeah.
um incredible fantasy, historical fantasy and magic. But yeah,
Oh.
like it's set in Oxford, and it's at the intersection of language and magic and colonialism in the 19th century, which sounds like it's more dense than it might be, but it's a really, really, really incredible read.
Oh, fun,
So
fun suggestions. That sounds great.
uh, for more cozy fantasy things, I provided Jamey with a link that'll be in the info below here too.
Great. Well,
What are you reading now?
well, speaking of cozy, I am reading the Marlowe Murder Club, which is uh, kind of a shameless ripoff of the Thursday Murder Club in the sense that it is the name itself, clearly,
For Marlowe?
yeah, does that. But it is about an older woman who is a crossword creator. And then her neighbor is murdered, and so she's trying to solve the murder, but she's a little bit of a hermit, and through her investigations has found some other women who she's friends with. So um like I said, I don't think they're breaking new ground on the book, but I'm still
Yeah.
enjoying it. Um
Yeah, I feel the lovable curmudgeon is another like popular trope in these kind
Very
of the cozy
true.
things. I really like it. Yeah.
Um I also recently, my college buddies and I have a book club, and we meet once a month and talk about a book, and we just read The Godfather, which clearly not a new book,
Wow.
but it was fantastic, and we all kind of separately went and watched the movie again, and, clearly the movie is kind of renowned, but in watching the movie, I thought to myself, if you hadn't read the book, you only get half of what's going on in the movie. Like the characters are, pretty one-dimensional in comparison to what you find out in the book. And so if you were a fan of the Godfather movie, you kind of have to go back and read the book. It's really interesting and good.
That's a great project.
Great.
There was a lot of books on your podcast list of the 25 or so that you've done that were some that I loved. Northwoods,
Oh yeah.
that was one you covered, and there was a few that had been some of my real favorites
You know,
for the last few years.
there was a
Uh,
fantasy book
oh, Demon Copperhead
Oh
as
yeah.
well. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, no,
Um,
that's a
absolute
fantastic one.
extraordinary book. Yeah. Um,
Depressing, and hard to read at
yes,
times, but
yes, for
great.
sure. Yeah.
Have you read in the fantasy realm, The Tainted Cup?
I had not.
It is a kind of murder mystery, but set in a fantasy world, and there's a follow-up that's by, Robert Jackson Bennett, and the second book in the series is called A Drop of Corruption, and there's a third book coming out this September, but those were fun.
The
Somebody
Tainted Cup.
recommended
Yeah.
those to
I feel
me.
like I've heard of it. I must know someone that's read it. I feel like
Yeah.
I'll
We
look some of that up.
we also read in our book club, Bad Monkey by Carl Hiaasen, um,
Yeah.
which then got turned into the Apple series, and the follow-up book, Razor Girl. Those were
Uh-huh.
entertaining. Carl Hiaasen is,
Yeah.
fun to read.
He's funny. I like
Yeah.
him. I listened to the
Oh,
previous
yeah.
episode was also a Carl Hiaasen one. I
Yes.
enjoyed that.
Well, I read
Um,
that, and then I think that spurred me to suggest Bad Monkey to the other group, so
and it's been adapted.
it has been adapted, and, uh, it is very funny, and it's very close to the book. There's there's very little difference, and I recommend it as a series. It was fun.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love a good laugh too, so we need that right now.
Definitely. Well, Josh, thank you so much for taking the time to do this and for sharing a cocktail that I'm going to have to try and recreate here at home for sure.
Yes. Yes. Thimbles old fashioned. Cheers. It's been a pleasure, Jamey. Thank you for
Cheers.
having
All
me.
right.